pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Call to order. Roll call.
Lori Nelson. Sean Sansel.
Here.
Kelly Lee. Here. Charlie Robinson.
Here.
Lucretia Free. Tom Beresny.
Here.
Frank Santa Cruz.
Here.
Ed Berber.
Here.
John Bernal.
Here.
Frank Fry. You were previously informed that Mr. Fry will be a little bit late in attending, but he will be here via WebEx. Bill Schlesinger.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you. We do have on the agenda introduction of new members. Nori Nelson is a new member, however, she is not here. So we'll move on to action item to number 4, approval of meeting summary for March 26.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as drafted.
I'll second.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Moving on to item 5, road repair update. Jason?
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. We are proud to present this month's update for our fiscal 24 pavement preservation and road repair program. Getting started with a substantially complete project update. You can see this slide's getting quite full, which is a good sign for this time in the year. In red there at the bottom, we have 4 projects that just recently moved into this substantially complete project list. The Linda Vista Terrace Mill and Pave project was substantially completed on the 22nd of March. They are currently wrapping up a couple last-minute items, but the job is, for all intents and purposes, done at this point now. Pitch Rock's northwest area, substantially complete on 328. We have given final acceptance on that job already, so that's completely done now. Central Southwest surface treatment, also 328. And it is also working the last couple items here this week. And then our big hard bid for the year, the Costa Dobes Catalina Mill and Pave project, was substantially complete on the 4th of April. And they're completely done at this point as well, too. In the last week or so, the final striping was put down on that project. So we do have a few ongoing projects to talk about. We have 3 that are in progress currently. The Sierrita Mountain Road project, I don't think I've said that right once. That project is still ongoing. They're still working through the paving part of this project. We're expecting completion on that later this week, with several other items still upcoming over the next month or so. So that project still has a decent amount of work going on. The Heritage Hills Mill and Pave project, they are finishing up all their utility adjustments and final striping. We're expecting that to be moving into that substantially complete column here pretty much as we speak in the next week or so. And then the Tanque Verde surface treatment project, this one really just got kicked off here in the last week. So they have been working for about a week and a half up on the northeast side. Started on Reddington, and now they're in the 49ers Country Club Estates subdivision doing fog seals, and then they'll keep moving their way slightly west over to the subdivisions off Bear Canyon Road here in the next couple weeks or so. So that's what we have ongoing. We do have a couple projects to talk about that are upcoming. So the Foothill Surface, the same contract. This is going to follow that Tanque Verde surface treatment project. It's the same contractor, so they're going to treat them almost as one project and just continue moving west across the north side of town. So this project, they're expecting to do work in the end of May, beginning of June timeframe, and possibly going through the middle of June as well on this. So this was awarded to Southern Arizona Paving for $1,079,999. And there are 3.66 miles of local roads for surface treatments and 4.93 miles of arterial collector surface treatments on this project. And then the last upcoming project, we mentioned this briefly last time, but the Arivaca repair project has also been awarded since we last spoke. It was awarded to Tucson Asphalt for $1,472,472. And this does include spot repairs on Arivaca Road, Arivaca-Sosby Road, as well as some locations within the Arivaca town site as well. The contractor is expecting to do this work during the June timeframe. So they'll be getting started with mobilization, stuff like that, toward the end of May, and really ramping into construction during June. And so with that, we'll look at kind of where we're at overall as a program for this fiscal year. You can see that complete portion of that pie chart has grown, well, pun intended, substantially. The in construction is also going to start moving over into that complete column pretty quickly with those two projects that we mentioned. And then that gray part is the awarded, getting ready to go into construction here shortly as well. Just a reminder that all of our crack seal projects and curb ramp projects are already complete, and so we're getting near to the end of all of our paving projects being complete as well, and our surface treatment projects wrapping up here shortly. And with that, oh no, clicker's not working. That was a tactic, just so I could announce. The map is active and updated, so I know we've been teasing that for the last couple months. It is updated now, and it is working, and so I do need to, I should have grabbed a different screen grab for you, because there's now going to be 4 statuses to look at. So previously, we've had 3 statuses. We've had the planned, active construction, and complete. We've added a 4th one that is complete but under warranty to help differentiate projects that have been completed but are still under the contract warranty for that job. So that's the 4th color that has been added. You can also see more information when you click on one of the roads now. You can now see the contractor that's doing that project as well as the project name that we've given it. And then we've put the generic date ranges on there as well. So once we have advertised it, we can put in the contract date ranges. So those aren't the exact dates for when the job will be done or the exact date for when that road will be done, but it will give a better range than just saying sometime in fiscal '24. We can now give a couple month window for that. So that's the new information that's been added to the map, and we'll have that going forward for when next fiscal year roads get added to this, which should be happening in the next, month and a half or so. We do anticipate that list getting ready to come out and be public here pretty soon. So with that, I will open for any questions. Tom.
Thanks, Jason. You got me on the Arivaca Road because I was going to ask about that. It wasn't on the slide deck you sent out. But I do have another question for you. You talked about the service treatments.
Yeah.
And you said Arizona Paving. When yourself and Michelle and Joseph came down to Green Valley a couple weeks ago, we kind of talked about the peculiarities of the company that does the surface treatments.
Mm-hmm.
Can you let everybody else know the peculiarity? Because it kind of caught me
So
unawares.
what Tom is talking about is there are certain surface treatments that that have to be subbed out to other contractors. So for that instance, like Southern Arizona Paving is the prime contractor for that job, but there may be certain types of surface treatments on that project that themselves cannot do, and they can't sub out to another contractor. Most of those contractors are from the Phoenix area. And so sometimes we're well aware of having the contractors in the region, and we're having to deal with their availability with other jurisdictions. With those subcontractors, we're also having to deal with the availability of the Phoenix jurisdictions, battling for them as well. So sometimes that can impact cost and also availability for scheduling too. So I
Okay,
believe
thanks.
that's what you were speaking
That's
to.
exactly what I was alluding to. Thanks, Jason.
Hearing none? Thank you, Jason.
Absolutely.
Moving on to item 6, letter to the Board of Supervisors. So we put this back on the agenda due to the technical difficulties and the fact that we could not validate that we actually voted to approve or oppose this item. So we'll let Ed do a summary, and then we'll proceed with the motion.
Yeah, the technical part was, there were 3 people online who helped make the quorum, and because we weren't getting back and forth, we really couldn't record their votes. So we're back again, looking at the letter to the Board of Supervisors that was drafted, that was approved by the committee with 2 amendments. The first amendment being some clarity related to the authority for the sales tax. Worked with Paul, Deputy Director Paul, on that. Thank you, Paul, for your help. Where's Paul? Okay. And also on the 3rd page where the second amendment to the letter was made, and that basically said, hey, if you can't do sales tax, or the impact fees don't do enough for us, let's think about offsetting some of the salaries of staff by some funds, some money from the general fund. So that's what that language basically says. So those were the 2 amendments. That's what's included in the letter. And we'll do it one more time. I'll make a motion that we approve the letter as revised.
Second.
Any other questions, comments?
Yes, Madam Chair. Maybe it's fortuitous that it didn't happen to get approved last time, because I've got a suggestion that I'd like to offer the group. And I had a little bit of an interchange with Director Skinner about this. At the very end of the letter, we mentioned that perhaps we wait until RTA next plays out before we take any action. Well, in reviewing what's been going on with RTA next, and this does relate to the next agenda item, but the city of Tucson seems to be about the only one that continues to press for making RTA next monies available for capital maintenance. And I still think that Pima County has as much of a stake in this as the city does, because we've invested so much in our major road system. So my suggestion would be that we add a statement at the very end of our letter where we mention RTA next, that the county's request should at least have request authorization to expend RTA next dollars on capital maintenance. I'm hoping at least airing that out, either the board will say, no, we're not interested, like the city council has said, yes, they are, or that we get both the city and the county both pursuing that topic, which I would recommend. But that's my suggestion, an amendment to add some language about making RTA next dollars available for capital maintenance. Madam Chair.
I'd like to speak to that, Madam Chair.
Sure.
I actually think that's an excellent idea. So we've been talking about this. I brought out 2 years ago, a year away from. I think it's relevant. Why can't we use funds that help from RT having problems? One way to help them from having problems that we've seen as new roads are put in is to have money available like that. So I think a sentence added like that is a friendly amendment from my perspective.
Yes, it is. And Madam Chair, Catherine and I have spoken a little bit about this, and I know the staff has some reluctance to support this position, but I still say this is the advisory committee's position, and the staff can certainly advise the board on whichever action they would recommend.
Okay.
So I consider that a friendly amendment, but we do need to vote on a friendly amendment, Madam Chair.
Okay, so can we state the motion then?
Restate it.
Yeah, John, would you restate the sentence, and even if you just draft it for us or
Yeah, I was
say it
going
out
to
loud?
say, we can wordsmith this
Okay.
later, but my my amendment would be that we add a statement at the end of our letter where we mention RTA Next, that Pima County also requests that our application for RTA Next funds to the RTA board should include the authorization to use that money for capital maintenance. Something to that effect.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I second it as a friendly amendment. Someone needs to second my approval of the friendly amendment.
Well, I seconded
He
it
seconded
before.
Oh, okay,
so-
okay.
Yes, he did.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Madam Chair? In principle, I like provide funds for capital maintenance for projects that have been constructed by the RTA previously, or just general capital maintenance? And does that need to be clarified at all in the position of the letter?
Madam Chair, I think that's a very good question because I think that topic has arisen at the RTA level. And I'm not sure, I think, again, next could be a legal question, other to whether those monies in RTA Next could be used for other major arterial or high-capacity roadways. So I'd be happy with whatever language we're comfortable with that just, in fact, that's why I kind of kept it vague. I didn't specify an amount. I'm just hoping that we can get authorization to use those funds, even if it doesn't happen immediately. I mean, it's a 20-year program, so, we need some flexibility, I think, to think forward. And if we never use it, that's great if we find money elsewhere. But if we run short, I'd like to see this be a place to get it.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think my concern is, and I think you bring up a point, is it legal?
Right.
Is it counted in law, and the Arizona Revised our PAG and our Regional Transportation Authority, can we use that money that we're asking the taxpayers to fill for a half-cent sales tax? Can it be used for, what does capital maintenance mean?
Well, and again, the
You know.
RTA board has had a lot of discussion about that because there were a lot of skeptics on that board as well. And again, to me, it's definitely not for routine maintenance, and it's not for local roads at all. It's intended for high-capacity roadways and for the major upgrades of the pavement, not just simple patching or sealing, expected in that sort.
I
And
think
and
it would
again,
be,
maybe Catherine's got some perspectives as well.
RTA board, it seems like it would be more palatable for consideration with the RTA board if it's limited in scope to something like regionally significant corridors, right, or something like that.
So be
But in essence, I think it's a good idea.
Or something that maybe something to help maintain those roads that were identified projects in 2006 to 26.
Right. That are now, some of them 20 years old and
Right.
need refreshment, yeah.
That was why I brought it up, is because some of these roads at certain points need maintenance, they need to be refurbished. And so it just makes sense to kind of focus it on RTA funds instead of mixing this up.
Madam Chair, I would accept that clarification that this authorization be applied only to roads that have previously been improved with RTA funds.
Okay.
Again, I think the question just needs to be broached. Another, I over there crying lone, and nobody is chiming in one way or another. I think the county.
Claire? Okay, one more time for clarification. Can somebody please restate the motion?
I would amend the original motion to include a statement at the end of the letter that refers to the RTA Next program, that Pima County amends its RTA Next request to include capital maintenance for previously improved regionally significant roadways using RTA monies.
Great.
Yeah, and I took that as a friendly amendment, and then John seconded it. So I think we're good on that, even if we're revising the phrasing a little bit at this point.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was clear for the minutes.
Yeah, good.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 7, RTA Next update and Pima County request for RTA funding.
Thank you, Chair Robinson, members of the committee. I'm Catherine Skinner, the Director of Transportation, here with the RTA Next update. So the week of April 1st was quite a busy RTA Next week. There were 2 Technical Management Committee meetings and 1 RTA Board meeting, and all told, when you combine it with the Regional Council meetings, it was about 12 hours plus of sitting in the PAG conference room that week on these issues. So I will be much more brief than those meetings in a recap of what has happened. When we last discussed it, the RTA board had not taken action on the recommended plan. They knew that there were some additional conversations that needed to be had with excess funds, contingency, debt service, and project phasing. And so that is what the main body of the discussions at Technical Management Committee have been. In those discussions, it was determined there should be $100 million of cost contingency. So not the $40 million of overlap, that's an addition, $100 million for just cost fluctuation, different economic contingencies, and $77 million for debt service. But then there's been just endless conversation about how do we mix and match all of the projects within this program. Ultimately, there was an action taken at the April 3rd meeting, and so it had a number of steps to it, so I will go through what those actions were. The first was that one of the city's projects on Irvington Road had been taken off of the proposed project list. It's a $60 million project. It was put back onto the named roadway project list. In order to fund that $60 million, the safety and active modes category was reduced by $60 million. Then within the active transportation and safety category, it was determined that there should be $100 million set aside for City of Tucson projects because they had a long list of named projects that had come originally off of the roadway list and gone to the active transportation. But that was very important for the regional, geographic spread of getting projects across the City of Tucson. So $100 million from that category reserved for the city, $35 million from that category reserved for South Tucson. There would be 2 named projects for Green Valley projects. Roads money for the county available for programming on an as-needed annual basis. As needed and as available, I should say. And then the second part of the conversation that was, very big conversation had to do with the various cost estimate. We'd been going off of an earlier estimate by the Eller College that said it would be around $2.34 billion. The City of Tucson had gone out to get an independent analysis for some of their tax initiatives. So that was only looking at within the City of Tucson. But when they inflated that for what the full region would collect, they thought there could be around $600 million. The RTA went back to Eller to get an updated forecast. That updated forecast really only took it up to about $2.46 billion. And that's for the pessimistic. So there was a little bit of extra money, which quite as we can fit all of these things in, but it was not quite as, hopeful. I think a lot of people were hopeful all of a sudden everything would go with and that wasn't the case. So then the discussion, and do we go? Really no discussion, optimistic. It'll either be pessimistic or base. Really no discussion of going with anything between. It'll either be pessimistic and the baseline. And there was a lot of conversation, well, what happens if we collect more revenues? And it was an important question because the city, has a lot of needs and has spoken at length about the amount of projects and funding that should be spent in the City of Tucson based either upon their population split or rather tax revenue collections. So wrapped up into the same motion was the concept of the city getting 50% of any excess revenue would go to them. The other 50% could be split up as appropriate within eligible plan elements. It was clarified in this that the transit allocation, which is at $610 million, would remain with what had been discussed earlier, which is maintaining existing RTA service levels for transit. 70 million for a bus or high capacity transit, bus rapid transit, and then the remaining funding would go to an expansion of the transit service. So that motion did pass, 9 yes votes, 3 no votes, with the entirety of the City of Tucson's representatives voting no. So then April 4th, that was April 3rd, very next day, we were back in the conference room there at PAG, and the RTA board met. It started with a discussion from Dr. George Hammond from the Eller College, going through what the assumptions were and answering questions to better understand what are these differences with the cost estimates. There were report outs from the Technical Management Committee co-chairs about everything that had transpired the previous 2 meetings. And ultimately, they decided they needed a special meeting. No action was taken in terms of what the RTA plan, next plan would look like. The RTA board is going to be having a special meeting right now. It is scheduled for Wednesday, May 8th at 1 p.m. That is the same day, I believe, that the TMC usually meets in the morning. So I have not gotten confirmation that the TMC is also meeting. And those dates have kind of been moving around the calendar, so they may have changed actually since I took my notes. But that is essentially where we are. You know, there was a lot of discussion. Maybe TMC has taken it as far as they can, and the RTA board needs to have the conversations about how do we get this over the finish line. In a similar manner almost to what happened with the CAC. The CAC took it as far as they can. It went to the TMC to refine. TMC has taken it a long ways. You know, it's with the RTA board now. Ultimately, they still are hopeful for having a plan ready for public review this summer. So with that, I will turn it over, I guess, to Mr. Bernal. If he has, I know this is kind of a 2-parter. We can either take questions, or John participated in a lot of the TMC meetings as well.
Madam Chair, I really don't have a lot to add other than to agree with Catherine that the RTA board seemed to conclude at the end of their last meeting that the TMC had done what they could in wrestling with this, and now it's up to the board to try and figure it out. And so I have not heard of any future meetings scheduled for the Technical Management Committee.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions for Director?
I do, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Catherine, last Thursday, the Green Valley Sarita Chamber of Commerce hosted Steve Hoffman, who's the Communications Affairs Administrator for RTA Next, at their 3rd Thursday breakfast. So he gave us an update and a briefing of what's happening in RTA Next. So not necessarily in a question, but maybe it is, shooting. He talked about what would be, there will be 2, and there's still to that in 2025. And say if this is your understanding or not. And so just say if this is your understanding or not. So they'll have the actual transportation plan or input, which would include have a public awareness campaign. But the thing that he said is only the named road projects would be on the ballot itself. Nothing from any of the elements like safety, transit would be on the ballot. Is that your understanding?
That is not my understanding.
Okay.
I would, my understanding has been that it would be a similar pamphlet as was used in RTA 1. So there are named roadway projects within the roadway element.
Right.
And then there's a safety and active modes element, and there would be a funding amount for that element. There would be a transit element and a funding amount for that element. There's a environmental and wildlife element. There would be a cost for that element. In the last plan, those other elements were also divided into categories that were explicit to, as I said, $35 million reserved for South Tucson.
Yeah.
I don't know what level they need to break it down to, but at least I believe they will have the elements for these other.
Ballot to the voters or in a
Because we're gonna-
pamphlet? Those are 2 different things. So what Steve was saying is, all you're going to see is the named roadway projects on the ballot.
That would be a legal question. I can't answer
On the ballot.
that.
And then the second question on the ballot would be the continuation of the half-cent sales tax. So, yeah, I just wanted to know what I heard and to get your input on what I heard last Thursday and what you've been hearing.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, the only thing I can add is that there has been some discussion in months past about being a specific list of projects, where the money, the city produced a long list of projects that they were ready to say, this will be our list, but I'm not sure the other jurisdictions are not going to go that route, smaller projects. Maybe what, we're not going to identify any of the smaller projects, apparently.
I think what Steve was saying, the ballot would be just way too long by putting all of the proposed, like you said, 2 in Green Valley and the safety element. Those wouldn't be on the ballot.
I think that's a discussion that the RTA board's going to have and understand, because what I've listed, different interpretation from how I've been going into this and listened to.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Director Skinner. Before we go to number 8, I would like to go back to number 3, and that is the introduction of our new member, Nori Nelson. Would you mind just giving us a quick introduction?
Sure. First of all, I apologize. I was in a traffic jam on my way here. I was asked by Supervisor Scott if I would consider being on. I've been active in the community in which I live in Hidden Valley. I've been the Hidden Valley president for a number of years and just recently concluded my term. Also a lot of involvement in the community. In Hidden Valley, I was very active in our roads debate, and we were delighted when we finally had that together. So I've been interested in transportation, certainly not an expert, but I'm happy to be involved.
Well, thank you. Okay, moving on to number 8, Mr. Banal and Paul Casatano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John and I didn't really coordinate how we'll deal with this, but I'll provide a little overview of what our plans are to better prepare our set of projects as we move forward with future years. So, John, you had mentioned that the City of Tucson had a long list of projects that they brought to the RTA Next table. And part of that very benefit was a transportation master plan process that they had gone through very recently that had very robust community outreach. They analyzed their network and their network needs. They understood in different ways the balance of needs between safety and congestion, and that kind of informed the selection and identification of their needs-based projects list. So Pima County has had a long history of a lot of great knowledge about its own transportation network, but much of that history has kind of, that institutional knowledge has kind of left us in a certain regard. So we still know general needs, but what we'd like to do is we are getting prepared to launch 2 significant transportation planning initiatives. And the first one is a safety action plan that we're moving forward with unincorporated Pima County as well as all of the jurisdictions within Pima County. So we got a $1.5 million grant from United States Department of Transportation to implement a Safe Streets for All transportation safety action plan. So what we're trying to do is safety performance. We work and we dive into understanding the safety performance of our network, and we want to establish a screening process and a data-driven analysis process to help us get from understanding that there's safety issues to what the heck can I do about those safety issues with explicit site-specific projects, as well as network-wide improvements that might be lighting or roadway departure issues or intersection improvements that we might standardize for certain types of intersections. So this is in some ways a replacement of what was once the healthy safety management system that was a very proud program for Pima County and a really effective program. It was a bit resource intensive in terms of needing, significant transportation engineer involvement. We're trying to streamline that a little bit so that we can essentially acquire and implement a safety analysis platform that will do network screening and also allow us to dig into project identification, select certain types of nationally accepted crash modification factors for certain roadway treatments as we're selecting what the general scopes of certain projects would look like. So that's going to be a pretty significant effort. We are entering into contract negotiations for that and expect to launch that project in the summer. It's going to be a 2-year process during which we're going to come out of it with a set of explicit projects and programs focused on safety improvements for Pima County and the unincorporated roadway network, transportation network that we own and operate. And then we'll also have similar for each of the jurisdictions. And in that, we're going to have a process that is going to be established and documented that will help us do this on a regular basis so that we don't have to stand up a giant plan every 3 or 4 years, but we can just make it routine part of business. Transportation. So we'll have that improvements project very available to go after federal grant money, to go after state money, to go ask the Board of Supervisors, look at our own budget. So it will put us in a much better position in terms of being ready to go with a lot of safety improvements. We are also going to be launching a fully comprehensive transportation master plan similar to the City of Tucson effort. So we don't need to really dig too much into safety because that's going to be done as part of the other effort, but we're going to look at congestion, full network performance. We would like to establish a full network performance analysis platform, GIS resources and the like, where we can bring in data for congested roadways, traffic volumes, land use, have all of that available to establish a process for us where we can prioritize corridor investments to address congestion or growth opportunities or whatever it may be. Again, coming out of that with a full set of Pima County and long range. We're looking at transportation project 5-year or unincorporated master plan. May not go looking at a 25-year horizon for the master plan. We may not go necessarily that far out with the safety action plan because we see it as a rinse and repeat. We're going to have to continue to look at that data. We do want to continue to look at the data with the transportation master plan, but we'd like to set that out at a 25-year horizon so we can pull projects into the long-range transportation plan that PAG puts together, the RMAP, and have a better representation of county explicit projects in that plan itself. So we're looking to establish these things as institutionalized processes that we can follow on a regular basis so that it's not terribly difficult for us to pick up and do a whole plan development each time we need to come up with a project list. What we found is that, in retrospect, the number and the explicit nature of the projects that the county did offer up for consideration within RTA Next, there's room for improvement there. I mean, there were some general categories that were identified for capital maintenance type projects and explicit capacity oriented projects that were very good, but we know there are more needs beyond that, and so we want to get detailed on what are those needs and how do we measure them. So those initiatives are going to be launched very soon. They're going to kind of run concurrently, relate to one another, and not repeat the activities, but complement each other. So that should put us in a very good position to get more detailed from the categorized list that we showed Mr. Verberg and the committee in terms of what we might do with additional funding that's invested for us. So with that, I'm happy to take questions and kind of defer to John if he'd like to add anything before we have committee discussion.
Chair, thank you, Paul. The last part that Paul mentioned is what really piqued my interest in this, the increased revenue scenarios that we came up with, 25 million, 50 million. They had some mention of needs, but most of them were not specified or at least quantified, and that would be my interest, and I'm glad to hear that the department's undertaking these efforts. That's all I had.
Okay. Mr. Gerber?
Madam Chair, Paul, who's going to lead this, and are you going to lead it? Who's going to do this on staff? Are you going to hire somebody as a part of this 1.3 million? What's the plan in terms of organizational approach to this?
Thank you, and Madam Chair, committee members, we are acquiring outside resources to help us with the plan development. We are looking at a full acquisition of a safety data analysis platform with our SS4A effort. It's a significant effort within DOT, as well as the staff resources vary in team, both in DOT as well as the health department is involved through a new light. We're seeing transportation safety through a new light as a significant public health crisis, and so we want to frame it that way. So we're committed from the staff level, but we are getting outside resources to help us through that effort because it's really a big undertaking. We'll do both plans will require outside resources to help us through.
Madam Chair, to understand for it's you're talking about the county coming up with a master plan and a safety plan. My first question is, it's all non-jurisdictional. It won't include Sarita. It won't include the non-Tucson jurisdictions in it.
So, thank you, Bill. Madam Chair, committee members, safety, our application included all of the jurisdictions within Pima County. So it is a partnership that will identify explicit City of Tucson needs, Oro Valley needs, what we need from an unincorporated transportation network owner and operator perspective. So we're looking at everything from the safety perspective. We don't necessarily need to do that with the Transportation Master Plan. City of Tucson has stepped through that effort. Marana is in the middle of that effort right now. So we're going to take care of our unincorporated network needs from a Transportation Master Plan perspective so that we could better understand where are the intersection improvement opportunities, how do we prioritize those investments and look for funding to move those forward and other types of projects.
Okay,
well.
That leads to my second question, which I've wondered for a long time. You're coming up with a master plan. Marana's coming up with a master plan. City of Tucson comes up with a master plan. What role does PAG have to take all those master plans and make sure they come together as a regional master plan?
So that's a great question. PAG's role essentially in the long-range plan effort, as we're involved in it now, they are compiling projects from the jurisdictions. And in years past, they have taken more of a community outreach type of role to identify, what's the mission, the vision of transportation from the community, and let's orient projects around that. This time, because giving deference with the next and the timing, they're kind of giving deference to the owning agencies to say, give us your lists, and we have to constrain it with what we reasonably anticipate funding coming to the region, but we're going to rely on you jurisdictions to tell us what your needs are.
Okay. As the different jurisdictions are developing their master plans, is there coordination looking at what is, when Pima County is doing their master plan, are they looking at what City of Tucson's master plan is?
We most certainly will.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I figured you would, but I thought I'd ask the question.
Yes. I can't speak for Marana. I imagine they are looking at, their connection opportunities with our roadways and other bordering communities, but, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Tom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple questions, Paul. Thanks for the briefing, the Tucson, the safety action plan. So you're going to look at groups like the Tucson, Pima County Bicycle Advisory Committee for input into that, the safety action plan, because you used that term, safe streets for all. And I know the alliance down there in the southern part of the county, that's what they call themselves. So the bicycle advocacy people, so you're going to tap into resources like that also, is that correct?
Thanks for the question, Tom. That's an important piece of our outreach activities. We need to get stakeholders involved in this, and it needs to be a community-driven effort. So we know that we need to look at the data and understand what it's telling us, but we want to also hear from community groups and citizens in terms of what are their safety needs, what's their perspective on that, because it's important to know where there's, user behavior and feelings of unsafe, I'm not going to send my 8-year-old out there riding his bicycle because it's just not going to happen.
Or my
The crash
8-year-old.
data may not tell us that, but the community input will help
Right.
us understand that in ways that we have not really fully understood at this point.
Okay.
So it's going to be imperative to involve those types of groups.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And for the second one, your 25-year transportation, master transportation plan. So the road repaving program and the funding through PAYGO ends in 5 years, 6 years? So is a version of what we're doing in the road repaving program, seeing that the funding may be different in how we maintain these roads, that we, by the end of the road repaving program's end date, all the roads should have been at a good level? Is that what it's shooting for, a good, a very good level? I can't remember.
Well, we have our range that we're looking
You're-
for. So 5%
spread,
or
yep,
less and
yep.
very
If we
poor.
get
Over
if-
50% very
If
good.
if we meet our goals for our ranges, okay, so is a next iteration of what we're doing now in the road repaving program going to be included in that transportation master plan?
Thanks, Tom. It is our intent to include what our needs will be to maintain a certain target, and if it's the same spread target that we're using right now, we'll certainly use that. If it's a more aspirational target, then we'll get an understanding of what kind of investment do we need to make on a regular annual basis so that we can identify that as part of the transportation. We'll lay out those and set of projects.
Okay,
We're not going to lay out those roadways as we don't currently for pavement activities, but we're going to identify that we need a certain amount per fiscal year in order to meet those targets that we've identified at this point.
okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Paul.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair, I guess that raises one question in my mind is the pavement condition index monitoring that we do, do you have a plan going forward of how often we'll go out and rate our roads?
So we try to go out every 3 to 5 years to rate our roads. That's kind of the pattern we've used. PAG did hire the same consultant we used this last time, so they have a master agreement. So when we get ready in another few years to put a contract out, we'll evaluate what the best method of acquisition is for that data. But yeah, that it's an important piece for maintaining the program that we have right now, but also long-term, I think, keeping an eye on how our system performs, that's how we can get a good snapshot of everything and then drill into organizing from the big picture, $20 million a year, to how we apply that funding.
Ms. Lee?
Oh, not at all. I didn't know you had.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple questions for you, Paul. When was the last transportation master plan done or completed?
So thank you, Kelly. As we have looked at it, our discovery is that there hasn't been an actual transportation master plan. There's been studies along the way that have been smaller pieces, but nothing quite of this scale and magnitude. So this will really be the first transportation master plan that Pima County has established to our knowledge.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Because I know for the planning department, they put together a comprehensive plan, and that's mandated by the state every 10 years to be updated. So there's no requirements by the state to get any master plans done in a certain time? Or why is every jurisdiction looking at doing that right now is my question, I guess.
Well, thank you, Kelly. That's an important piece. I think part of it is the recognition that jurisdictional understanding of their own needs is becoming more and more important. And as we've seen the transition within the PAG, Long Range Transportation Plan, and the supplemental plans that they've used to develop, they're turning to the jurisdictions for, plan out what your network needs are and shift to us, and we'll pull it into the long-range plan. So that shift has kind of placed the burden on the jurisdiction, and it's better to some fruit and their plan to and move to. It's really led to some fruitful, plan developments, transportation and what the town of Marana has been developing with their transportation master plan. We see a lot of value and need there, and we think it'll be really beneficial for Pima County.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I know from previous experience working on master plans in regards to zoning, it's always helpful to get research done by what other communities do, possibly in Maricopa County, and just one of my recommendations, maybe look at some of their master plans up there and make sure that you're including everything you need to. But and I also think it's important to use a consultant that has a lot of experience working on these type of studies. But yeah, everything you're doing sounds really, really good and moving into the future.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I agree with Kelly that it's a really good move on Pima County's part.
We certainly anticipate bringing more updates back to the committee as we launch these efforts.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Beresny, moving on to number 9, Vice Chair Beresny.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So, on K9 online, I missed it on the regular news broadcast, and I haven't seen this item on a Board of Supervisors agenda this month, but in the article, in the interview that took place, it stated that Pima County is receiving $4.5 million in marijuana tax revenues, marijuana sales revenue, and they split the county into the revenue coming into Pima County, the $4.5 million into the sheriff, $1 million to the county general fund, $1.4 million to the sheriff, nearly $800,000 to the county health department, and $1.3 million for highway maintenance. So the question I posed to Catherine, and she hadn't heard of this yet, is what are we going to do in the Department of Transportation with the $1.3 million?
Right, so I will, as we sometimes find with news articles, there's truth to it, and then there's a little bit more information. So, we had discussed, I believe, and here's some background. So in 2020, the public voted for, the legalization of marijuana, and that included provisions for how taxes collected would be distributed. And so that's what you're speaking of, that distribution to general funds, to highway use, which is really, it goes into the HERF bucket for the sheriff's department and for the health department. So DOT has already been receiving these funds, but they don't come as a set aside. They go into that overall HERF bucket that we call about. So there's a tank chart that we look at on the ADOT site. So HERF is made up of a combination of gas tax, use fuel tax, motor carrier tax, vehicle registration fees, part of vehicle license tax, and other miscellaneous fees. Well, now it's also fed, one of those miscellaneous fees is this marijuana tax.
Okay.
And so that's where the 1.3, if not for that, we would have even less HERF to work with on an
Right.
annual basis.
So does that 1.3 then, so have you been projecting it over the last couple of years into your budget?
Correct. So that was
Okay.
already included when we
It's already included.
projected
Okay.
revenues for fiscal year '24, and it will be moving forward.
Okay, thanks.
Does anyone have any? Moving on to call to the audience. Do we have anyone? Sure. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Jerry Rumley. I've come to a number of these meetings over the years, and I'd like to welcome the new District 1 people, since they are just starting into this venture. A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to talk in front of the group and the district supervisor. Also, a saying. I live in Golden Heritage Village, which is over to the west side of the being reconstructed Foothills Mall. And that at the mall, there'll be some money come up into that area as soon as they get the mall rebuilt. 1/8 of a mile of rotten streets. We just barely made it through the PCI adventure. What I would like to say to you, this group, and anybody who wants to hear it, let's make Golden Heritage Village golden again. 7/8 of a mile of streets isn't that hard. I'm trying to do it by buying a lottery ticket every week. And if I hit, you guys don't have to worry about it. So if you can help me out there, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to future items for discussion. Does anyone have anything? Talking to her. If you have, we'll get it on the, please submit it.
Madam Chair,
10
I do have one comment. I think we need to
on the agenda.
this. I do have one comment, and I think we need to be contemplating this. It's one thing to send a letter to the board. It's another thing to go and talk to your supervisor about it. I'm going to team up with Frank, and we're going to go talk to our supervisor. And I hope that the rest of the committee will consider going and talking to either the administrator or the supervisor, because sending a letter, as we found out last time around, doesn't get you money necessarily. But hearing the story and answering their questions is more likely that they'll be responsive. We can't guarantee anything, of course, but what they hear from the members of this committee, I think, could resonate with them. So I am suggesting, I'm not sure it needs to be an agenda topic, but I think we all should contemplate getting together and going and talking to our supervisor once this letter goes forward. So just a comment, and maybe for future discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next meeting is scheduled for May 28th. Anything else? Hearing nothing, we are adjourned.